Last week was Earth Day. And so we did what we usually do with a lot of things. We spent a day where we paid attention to the Earth, or maybe a weekend if we're lucky, or perhaps a few days before and after. I just think this is wrong. It's wrong. We should actually be making it Earth Year, and we should spend a weekend where we just take a break from it. In my opinion, the Earth, the way we're treating the Earth, should be at the top of our list of social, political, theological discussion. This is what we should be paying attention to. This is the real future. This is the thing that is going to determine whether we survive as a people and as a planet. Last week, because it was my turn to preach, at 11 I preached on Earth Day, and I decided since I'm preaching 2 weeks in a row that I would just grab this opportunity to at least make it an Earth 8 or 9 days. In the process, I discovered kind of an interesting thing. I discovered that Job, the book of Job, and I don't know what pictures you have of the book of Job, but I had my own pictures of the book of Job, that I discovered that Job was a great green book. That if you look up on the internet, scriptures about the earth, that a bunch of things from Job pop up. And one of the reasons for that is that, Job's having this great conversation at first kind of with himself and with a distant God. But when God steps in to essentially rebuke Job for sort of pretending to know more than he really knows, what God does is he creates a kind of a litany of the amazing elements of the created world. And I'm just going to read a few verses for this, but at some point you should read like chapters 38 through 42. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? Who was where its footing set? Or who laid its cornerstone? While the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy. What is the way to the place where the lightning is dispersed, or the place where the east winds are scattered over the earth? Who cuts a channel for the torrents of rain and a path for the thunderstorm, to water a land where no one lives, an uninhabited desert? To satisfy a desolate wasteland and make it sprout with grass? Can you loosen Orion's belt? Do you know the laws of heaven? Can you set up God's dominion over the earth? I feel that this little bit of putting Job in his place could very well apply to us. That we're in this amazing and interesting time when truth is really a big issue. What is the truth? What is it that we believe? And it's interesting that as progressive Christians, actually one of the things that we would say is that there isn't just one truth. Perhaps there are many truths. But there's a challenge to that idea, and that is, well, who's to decide which of those truths is really a true truth? And what's the difference between a truth that's related to belief, those things that we can't really know, but we have ideas about, and actually the things that we can know? I think there's a difference between those two things. I think there's a difference between knowing, for example, what happens to us after we die. We have a lot of ideas and beliefs about that, and some would claim that as truth. I think that's a little bit different than to be able to look at the evidence, what we see, what we feel, what we can test, that is right there in the world, the things that we can look at, that we can study, that we can figure out. There's a difference between those kinds of truth, in my opinion. And yet, in the current atmosphere, situation. That's not what's happening. Actually, in my opinion, people are deciding what works best for them, and they're finding the facts or the authorities to support their particular beliefs. As Christians who have a commitment to truth, to integrity, to the understandings of the way that power works in the world, to understand the challenges of wealth and greed and the concentration of wealth and power, that we have an obligation, a responsibility to be raising the questions about how this conversation is playing out in the world. And these are some things that I notice. I notice, for example, I watch MSNBC. I don't know if the rest of you do. All us good lefties watch that and a bunch of people who like prison shows. I don't really understand that part. But. And what I've noticed is that the commercials in between all this kind of progressive political point of view are oil companies trying to convince us that they are interested in alternative energy, which, of course, as progressive people, we thought, oh, yes. I do not believe that. You might, and that is up to you, but I do not believe that. What I believe is that this is manipulation. That's what I believe. Because one of the things that I know about the way that our brains work is that if you say something often enough, if someone hears something often enough, it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. We will assume it's true. So if over and over and over and over and over and over again we hear, yes, Chevron, BP, we're all for alternative energy, that eventually we will believe that. We will not question it, just because we've heard it, a little pathway in our brain has been formed. I think that lacks integrity, it lacks truth, and that it needs to be named as such. There's a new book out. I haven't read it, but I just heard about it, and I want to read a little description. It's called The Merchants of Doubt. And this is what it said about the book. In their new book, Merchants of Doubt, historians Naomi Oreskes and Eric Conway explain how a loose-knit group of high-level scientists with extensive political connections ran effective campaigns to mislead the public and deny well-established scientific knowledge over 4 decades. In 7 compelling chapters addressing tobacco, acid rain, the ozone hole, global warming, and DDT, Oreskes and Conway roll back the rug on this dark corner of the American scientific community, showing how the ideology of free market fundamentalism, aided by a too-compliant media, has skewed public understanding of some of the most pressing issues of our era. Now, you could read that paragraph and you could say, well, I don't believe that's true. I don't believe what these people have written in this book. And I think for any of us to make an intelligent decision about that, it might take a little bit of time and effort. And at the same time, we can follow our hearts, follow our spirits, follow what we've been taught by coming to church Sunday after Sunday, that we have a responsibility for this earth. We have a responsibility for all people, not just our own self-interest. That we have a responsibility to speak to power when it's being abusive. That we have a responsibility to call out manipulation, the bending of truth, because people are vulnerable to that. The earth is an amazing thing, and the earth will survive whether we do or not. Personally, I would prefer to survive with the earth And I would like to survive. I would like to think that the generations that come after me, that Zoe, my great niece who was born 3 days ago, that when she's an adult or even an old person, will have a lively, healthy planet to live on. How can we not carry this deep and inner concern? I think we could hear God's voice as a rebuke to us, but I think we can hear God's voice calling us to pay attention to the amazing wonder of the earth, to recognize and embrace the fact that we can't fully understand it, to know that it is beyond us, and yet it is also in our hands.